My name is Monk Rowe, and we're filming on the campus of Hamilton College today for the Jazz Archive. I'm very pleased to have Byron Stripling with me today, who has put some great time in at a jazz festival here. Trumpeter, vocalist, actor, motivator. As a young man, were you one of those people who liked to get up on the stage? Was that something that seemed to be part of your character, even at a young age?
You know, not necessarily, but I think, you know, in all of our lives, things happen and they sort of lead to something else for me. And I think for a lot of black people, is it okay to say black on the tape?
I think black is...
Or can I say African? I have to say African American.
Well, you know, you
I still say black. I haven't shifted yet, you know?
I think we're back to black, actually.
Are we back to black?
We're definitely not Afro-American.
Yeah,
that's supposed to be
African American.
African American.
I mean, I understand why the term is, but I got to just change my habit, and it's a longer word to say. So I just still say black.
I'll say black if you say black, all right?
Okay, that's cool. But it was a lot of black people, I think, have the church as their foundation, and I was often or all the time in church because my father was the choir director. And so I didn't really have a choice in terms of the singing thing. And also, when nobody wanted to take a particular solo, then my father said, you got to sing the tenor solo or the baritone. I was both because he lacked tenors and he lacked baritones. So, you know, that's where I think my first performing thing started to really come into effect. And when I would have to learn a solo, and many times it was a classical solo because my father did a lot of, you know, we did like the Handel Messiah and all Schubert Mass in G and all these like little church masses that people do. And so with that, I'd have to do these solos, and that began the performing thing. But I wasn't one of those kids that was pushed on stage at all. You know, it's just a nurturing of the love. You know, my family had so much music, and music became like an integral part of our lives. And I learned very early on, as you spoke about how you had the radio under your pillow, you know, many nights. And it's the same with me. I had, when I was growing up, they first had those little cassette tape recorders that you could buy at Radio Shack, the real poor quality. But actually, you know, we've been with Ed Shaughnessy here for a couple days. And what I used to do, and what makes me think about that is the Tonight Show, is I would record, like if I'd watch the Tonight Show, and if they say, okay, tonight we're going to have Della Reese, and we're going to have this guy, or Sammy Davis, and he's going to do a duet with Doc Severinsen and that. So I take my tape recorder and record that particular thing, and I had like, and that's what was the one great thing about that show, was that they had like such a variety of artists, jazz people. They have a classical singer like Beverly Sills come on with just a piano player and sing. You know, I record this stuff, and I'd have like this composite tape of all these great artists, and that would go under my pillow at night as I listened to it, or I'd listen to the jazz radio station and do the same thing. If they say the next thing is going to be some trumpet, this or that, I'd press record, and you know, so you get a great composite tape that way.
What denomination was the church?
It was Baptist, you know.
When the music was used in the church, was it fairly strict to follow the music, or was there a bit of improvising that went on in a gospel sense?
I mean, yeah, in the gospel part of it, yeah, there was definitely some, but more than, I mean, more than the varying of improvisation, because a lot of, you know, I got to be honest, my impression is that a lot of music claims to have improvisation. I mean, you'll get classical people that say, and I've even, you know, heard people on TV say on panels with jazz musicians, oh, I improvise too as a classical musician. I put my trills in different places and I do the, you know, and gospel improvises, rock musicians improvise, but, you know, jazz is a whole nother level of improvisation. So in the jazz sense, we weren't improvising, but the thing I think with gospel music was the feeling was certainly there. And for me, you know, again, you realize the power of the music when I would see people like my grandmother, who never had a high school education even, who was a poor speller and a poor reader, but yet she put 3 of her children through college through just working her ass off.
Wow.
And when she would go to church and all they would do was play about 4 bars of one of her favorite hymns, and she would begin to shout. Now that is confusing to a young person. It's like, you know, it's like walking in on when you're young and seeing somebody making love. You don't really know what that is. And it's the same with seeing your mother or your grandmother get the Spirit in the Baptist church. What is that? You know, and it was only later I was like, started to realize she's like giving everything up to the Lord. She's been working her behind off. She's very happy her children are not in jail. That she was able to provide a better way for her kids, and this is such joy for her, and she thanks God for it, you know. But it took me a long time because all I knew is, Mom, Grandma's freaking me out. She's over there screaming and shouting, and I don't know why. Think about that. It's a weird feeling for a kid. It's all, you know, all those impressions that you get with a kid that stick in your mind. Those kind of impressions, and the fact that the music was that powerful and it could do that to her was very interesting to me. And so, you know, when you have experiences like that with music, you know, and I know in my own life, and I know I'm sure in your life, you've had music sort of bring you out of depressions, music give you a high, and it's really a powerful anchor that can give you the spirit of what you need to do. And I think that's why you and I and every other great musician are in this business. You know, it's not for money, it's because of the feeling that it gives us.
I can tell that you try to get that idea across to students too when you talk to them. That feeling of the power of music, the number of times I've seen you in front of a group of kids now, I can tell that that's pretty important to you to try to get across to them.
Yeah, well, you know, I think ultimately, Monk, it's no good to have something and you can't share it. And from the beginning, whenever I've learned something that has affected my life, I've immediately wanted to share it with someone. And since I come from a family of teachers, I also feel that I'm a teacher. It's sort of, I think really ultimately we all are teachers. But when I find a piece of music that affects me, when I learn something new, I immediately want to share it with somebody. But you know what? That has a sort of a selfish thing, because when I get to tell somebody else about it, it reinforces whatever I've just learned too. That's one of the great things about teaching. It's you learn it, you share it with somebody else, but as you're repeating it, you're embedding it in your consciousness even more. So it's a sort of a double whammy, a double something that you get from it.
Now, you had mentioned that your family moved around quite a bit. You're from Atlanta, but that you've lived in a number of different places. Yeah.
Well, my father was a mass murderer, so what happened is we moved around.
You got on the lam all the time.
You got to keep on the run.
That's right.
No, what happened was you know, my father was a musician, a classical singer, and you know, he's from Georgia, and it took the big step of going to Kentucky to get his master's, Colorado to get his doctorate. Then we moved to Minnesota for a teaching gig, St. Louis he had a teaching gig, and he's finally settled in Texas where he's been about 12 years. But, you know, it's just that process of getting degrees in different places. But this was a big step for our family because no one had moved out of Georgia. Everybody sort of just stayed there, and you did what you did in Georgia. And that was, you know, in later years, it's fun to learn that, you know, Emerson said, do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. And for him, that was a fearful step for he and my mother. And, you know, you've had this in your life when you and your wife or you have taken steps in your life, that different things that your parents haven't done. You know, quickly for me, what's a musician do? My father and mother knew that musicians, there are these people out there that they sometimes heard on record, but what do they do? And my father and mother have often called me up and they said, well, what'd you do today? And I said, well, I was just at Hamilton College and I did a thing. And they said, well, what are you doing today? I said, well, I don't have anything today, Dad. He's like, you need to get a job.
No kidding.
So, you know, but look, Mark, if you don't understand that concept of, well, maybe I'm not working for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. Maybe I don't work for a week and a half. If you've been used to 9 to 5, see, you know, us musicians here, and so few of us talk about it, and I make it my job to talk to students about it that want to go into music. So many of us, I'm not on a specific pension plan. I have to take that responsibility myself. I'm not on any college payroll for a health plan. I have to take that responsibility myself, you know. So my parents didn't understand that. And I always tell kids, how many of you have been told by your parents, you shouldn't go into music, let's just do this for fun, you'll enjoy it, it's great, but you need to get a real job. And usually I get 60% of the people say that when I'm speaking to people that are aspiring musicians. And I say, you know what? Your parents are absolutely right until you can prove them wrong. And that means that you have to then get ammunition, and you have to be able to say, well, this is what I will do as a musician. These are the opportunities. So one of the first things I do is have them make a list of everything you could do in music. And what I can do is sometimes I'll give them an average week for myself. You know, this Monday, I'm going to play a jingle for Jolly Jelly or something kind of thing like that, where I'll go in, I won't see the music ahead of time. Most times in the 21st century, you know, that's my catchword. Yeah. You're the only person in the studio. I usually go in by myself. In this particular company I'm working for, I'm usually the only trumpet player there. They've already pre-recorded a track, and they're going to be like, Byron, here's some music, play this on top of it. Sometimes I'll go improvise something on top of it. Sometimes they won't want anything close to improvisation. Sometimes it'll be classically oriented. Sometimes they'll want the flugelhorn. Has to be very well in tune. Playing with a synthesizer is very different than playing because the synthesizer is right on the pitch, which means I got to pull out because we tend to play a little sharp as brass players and try to get a little edge. Oh. We play a little bit of, just a little bit of, you know, so you have to adjust differently and you know. There's all those things. You wouldn't want me to play flat, would you?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
That would be a downer.
A little sharp is better. Literally be a downer.
Yeah.
There's that, you know. Then the other thing, I'll go through a week of what I do. And I say, okay, now I want you to write down all the things you could do as a musician. Shows, club dates, weddings, this, that, boom, boom, boom. Make that list. Then draw a line and write on the other side the specific skills you will need to do those specific things. What will you need to be a club date musician? Do you have to learn tunes? Do you need to learn feelings? Do you need to just be more attentive as you listen to the radio so you can sing that new song, And I Will Always Love You, Whitney Houston, you know? Yeah. You need to know, the song you were singing just a minute ago. You know what, I was getting confused that song with it? Goodbye with a little help from my friends. Remember the commercial? Come to a girls' club and C, come to a girls' club and B. You guys don't remember that.
Wow, I don't remember that one.
It's a girls' club. They just, anyway.
Well, maybe you played on it.
Maybe I did. I hope I'm getting paid for it, though. What do you need to be a Broadway musician? Okay? And then you write next to what the skills you need. What a studio musician? What do you need to be a soloist in a jazz club? What do you need to be a classical soloist? Sometimes I'll get a call to play with a concert band to play just a classical-oriented program like classics. Play Fly the Bumblebee or Virgin de la Macarena or something, some Rafael Mendez stuff. What are the skills? What do you need to do? You know, and then draw another line. Okay, how am I going to go about achieving those things? What kind of practice schedule am I going to have to set up to make these things happen for myself? Then you got all these different, and ultimately I always tell people, find out the thing that you ultimately want to do. But, you know, just have these, whereas people used to say, you know, get a teaching degree so you'll have something to fall back on. And if you find like I did that you didn't want to fall back on that, I don't want to fall back on something. I want to fall into something. And what I want to fall into is the things I want to do. I want to have the trumpet mouthpiece up to my lips because I love that.
Do you think if people set themselves up for that safety net, that's where they're going to end up going?
Well, I didn't want to say that, but I absolutely do.
Yeah.
So I think if you don't want to teach on that kind of, I want to teach. I definitely want to. I love it. But I don't want to teach in that setting. I have so many friends graduate from school and now they're conducting elementary school bands, which is great. And I talk to elementary school kids all the time. That's just not my place. And I know for many of my friends it's not either. But they fell back onto something because that's all they knew what to fall back on. Right. I wanted to make sure I didn't have anything to fall. I had to fall into either playing this trumpet or not doing anything. You know, I don't know what else I would have done. But, you know, it's always like I tell people, you know, if you can think of anything else besides music that you'd like to do, then do that because this is going to take every ounce of sweat that you can muster up. It's really a hard profession, but the rewards that you get from it are so immense that, you know, if you want to do it, just do it 1,000%, you know.
Did your father and your mother, even though they were into music, still wonder about your choice. Did they have an attitude, pro or con, about jazz in itself?
No, they didn't have a problem with jazz, and because I was very lucky with them. You know, I came from that era of black, there's that word again, of black families that stressed a couple things, and you and I had talked about before. First was education. They come from that sort of Martin Luther King era where education is your way out, which, you know, they impart that to me, and it sticks with me, and I still can't think of, you know, and as I study and try to help other people and help myself, I realize that by increasing the quality of the product or service that I can deliver to people, I, you know, can always hopefully be employed, because, you know, the thing I always stress to young people is that you want to be the absolute best at what you do. You can ask any price that way, et cetera, et cetera. So there was the education thing they stressed, which they got from that era, of that Martin Luther King era, of get out of the ghetto, educate yourself, go to the next level. That was that was the first thing for them. And then the jazz thing, they were from that era of people that were proud of black entertainers. You know, excuse me, that era of people, it's so great. They had such pride in, like, who was the, Sugar Ray?
The Fighter?
The Fighter.
Yeah.
You know, like, and even Keter Betts and Houston were talking about, man, when he would fight, everyone, you know, it's like that was like rallying point.
Yeah.
It's like, well, they could kick us down, but we got the best fighters, we got the best athletes, we got the best artists. And so we saw, when I was a kid, Leontine Price, and we were so proud. I mean, it was like when we walked into the little hall, just my mother and father's head just went a little bit higher.
Wow.
Because they were saying, she's ours, you know, this is something that we're proud of, you know, and you can oppress us in all these other kind of ways, but we've got these great artists for you. Lena Horne, they were so proud of, and they took me to see her. They took me to see Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald twice, took me to see Duke Ellington 3 times. Count Basie, I went a couple times. Then my father, there was this hall that would always have him. He would just drop me off at 8 o'clock and pick me up at about 1:30. $5 it cost to go in. If you didn't have a seat, it was a dance, you know. They were so proud of all the great, like, black artists at those times and entertainers, Sammy Davis, who I didn't get to see. But, you know, if these people were on TV, I don't know if you remember that group, Hines, and Dad.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, Maurice Hines, the other Hines brother, he introduced me to my future wife. So he became a good friend. But whenever guys like that were on TV, it was like my mom would, like, the Hines boys are on, or Lena Horne's going to be on, and we'd all run to the TV to see this, you know. So my parents didn't have a stigma about jazz. Their thing was, like, they were so proud of these people. And they knew that the only problem they had, they knew that there were those people who were able to make a good living for themselves. But they didn't know what these other people did. And that's why, for me, they said, look, go get an education degree so you can teach, have something to fall back on, and that's what musicians do. And so I had that illusion too. So what I had to do, and again, what I've told students is, you've got to educate yourself, find out what musicians do. Ooh, do. Have to find out. That was deep. But find out what musicians do and study them, ask them questions. So what are you doing an average day? And how can I get to be able to have, again, with that list, the skills to do those things? How can I prepare myself to do these things? And the one thing, I know I'm on a tangent, but the one thing I think is that colleges should be doing the same thing, because many times I think that unfortunately, this whole big band thing that many colleges are into, it's great, you know, and it helps teach ensemble playing. But I want to make sure that when people leave college, they've got skills to be employable musicians.
Yeah.
And a lot of the big band training that they're getting, I don't know if that's necessarily, that should only be a part. Really, they could almost start stressing improvisation these days, because in the 21st century, my catchword again, I think there's going to be more opportunities for people to have little niches for themselves. You think of a guy like Anthony Braxton. This guy from ECM Records, he was recording with them for a while. He's got a market of people that really love his kind of music. And he's built a little audience for himself. That's what people are going to be doing through the internet, building themselves a website, recording their own record, being able to download a selection from their new record, having somebody download that, listen to their music, and decide, oh, I like this guy. So Monk Rowe's one of my new guys I like. He's got a little website. I can order his records. I don't even have to go through a distributor. Go to the website. I can order it through the website. He'll send me a good copy of it. I can read all about him and where his next gig is on the web. See, it's interesting. We're going to be able to bypass a lot of things as time goes on. So I think it'd be important for a college to teach that to young people, as well as the other skills that they've been, integrate new things into it.
Plus, you said, talking about not having a 9-to-5, that you don't have the health insurance and all that. And I don't know at what point young musicians start to realize that they have an added burden, that they have to do that kind of thing themselves.
Yeah.
That some company isn't taking care of their retirement and their health insurance and, all that kind of thing.
But, I mean, I don't know if you were in my lecture at IJ.
I was.
Yeah. Well, here's the interesting thing about all that with musicians. We've been doing that for years, sort of taking responsibility for our own things. Well, I'm sorry to say that it's happening more to everyone. And as companies come up with more catchphrases like downsizing and outsizing, companies are coming in these days. I was supposed to go to Japan in June with the Eastman Wind Ensemble, sponsored by Kodak. But Kodak couldn't do that because they had to lay off 1,200 employees. Okay, and people find out and say, well, wait a minute, we have a slow period in February, in January, we have a slow period in August. Why don't we just hire people, almost adjunct or whatever? We need secretaries, we'll hire them. If we've got a big project come in, we don't need full-time secretaries. That's the way it's going.
Yeah.
People are trying to figure out, ways to save money. But here's the interesting thing about all that. It's not putting people out of work, and I feel that unions want you to believe that, and I am a union person, and actually I do have a pension program through the union, which is very good. What it does is it frees up the creative potential of people for different things. That's the only thing technology can do. So in other words, for some job or somebody normally, let's think about the post office and it will happen soon. In the post office, how they usually have a bunch of people behind there helping you with things. In New York, they're very slow. What about pretty soon, the technology's already there, it's just that they have to wait a few years till the union contracts run out. You go to the post office, you put your envelope on top of a machine, you press the buttons, you put in your dollar in a little thing, it comes out the amount of postage you need, you stick it on there, you throw it in the thing. You don't need a person to do that. Those people can be freed up for things that are more creative for them. The people will be happier and they won't have to shoot people in the post office. Yeah. The people will be happier because they'll feel more productive. Stop laughing, Luis. People will be more productive. I got him on that. You can laugh.
So you're a fan and supporter of technology.
I'm not. In my philosophy about technology, it isn't good, it isn't bad, it just is. Yeah. And we all definitely benefit from any innovations that happen, in technology. So, go with it. What are you going to do? Fight it? It's not like I'm for or against it. Again, it's just it's there. It's there, and I'm for it when it can help improve my life. I have a microwave. I don't know what it's doing to me. Somebody should study that really, because I'm not sure we got the real deal on if microwaves cause any kind of cancer or something. I should probably get rid of mine.
Well, let me take you back for a minute. The vocalizing in the church was your first kind of serious exposure to music. When did the trumpet come along?
Well, the trumpet was there the whole time, and always listening to trumpet. But in terms of, you have more opportunities to sing in church than you do to play. But actually, what would happen is we had a great minister, Reverend Brown, and he loved classical music. And he started asking me to also play classical trumpet solos in church, which is nothing better, Every trumpet player on Easter can get a gig, too, Yeah. Even guys that suck. And it's true. It's funny, I played this Easter, I played a Torelli concerto, and the people went crazy. And I said, well, who have you been having here on Easter? I said, some guy who said he was a trumpet player. He was like a trumpet owner. He played once a year.
Trumpet owner, I like that.
There are people that play once a year on Easter, because you can get, because on Easter you can get your price, because all the trumpet players are busy, they're looking, so I always wait till the last minute, So anyway, these people were like, they had some guy that was terrible. And they had never had a good trumpet player. But so I started playing trumpet solos in church and things like that. And then I found out, it's another good thing for young people to check out too. I found out I could also, through that same literature, play somebody's wedding. I mean, trumpet voluntary sounds great for a bride as she's walking down the aisle, or just as some music to get people in the mood, or any kind of little Baroque trumpet thing with organ sounds really pretty for a bride. But the one thing I learned that I could ask a bride was, who's playing your party afterwards? And then all I had to do was start to play some of the tunes that I heard on the radio, like Feelings and Just the Way You Are, those tunes that were popular in the 70s when I was in high school. You know, you learn those tunes by ear on the radio. You find a group, get some sheet music. Of course, I only had about 10 tunes, but we just kept repeating them. But that's what you do when you're first starting. But I found out, look, you can, if somebody calls you and asks you to play the surface, tell them that you got a band too. And ask them what their favorite tune is. And they'll probably say, wise men say, only fools. Are you laughing again, Luis? Fools rush in.
So did you start singing at these weddings too?
I'd sing a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit, just a little bit. But, you know, you find somebody's favorite tune and you play it a couple times for them, they think you're a good band.
Yeah.
So between those two things, you know, you can start to get a performing thing going. And that's the most important thing as you're coming up when you're young, is finding a place to perform. It's a hard niche to get into, but that's very important to do. And that's why church is so valuable, not only for the religious experience that you get, but that it can provide people that even sometimes are just starting to learn their instruments. You get very little criticism in church, you know. They'll let you sort of screw up a little bit.
Very forgiving.
They're very forgiving in church. It's true, and it's helped a lot of people. You know, look at Aretha Franklin was raised in the church through the way she sang. You know, was able to really get her talent going there.
Yeah.
And so many artists have been like that.
You mentioned an anecdote about getting to see Count Basie and so forth. Did you have aspirations to play in the big bands that were still around as a young man?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I started a relationship with some of the guys in the band too, because they'd come about 3 or 4 times a year to Minnesota, where I was living at the time. And I'd say, look, what's your address? And they gave me the address of Willard Alexander, the booking agent in New York that booked every big band. I later found out, you know, 660 Madison Avenue, New York, 1002, whatever it was. It was, you know, this address, and you could just write the guy in the band, Count Basie Orchestra, Willard Alexander, 660 Madison Avenue. I never forgot that address, because it was like, so I would write this bass trombone player, Bill Hughes, or the manager, or trumpet player at the time, Sonny Cohn. And I'd see these guys and I'd ask them questions and this and that. And so they sort of knew me from that, you know. And, you know, I went with a bunch of bands before Basie Band. But then when they finally heard about me, they're like, that's that kid that used to write us letters, you know. And one thing that's important to that band is that you know the music, you know. You know, if you go in the drum chair in the Count Basie Band, most of the charts are missing to the standards, like Shiny Stockings and 1 O'Clock Jump and Whirly Bird and all the hits. There's no music to those. And really there shouldn't be and doesn't have to be, because if you're going in that band, you have to know the music enough to play it by memory as a drummer. You know, and even me, when I had the shout course, the Shiny Stockings memorized, because I just had played it with records so many times. 1 O'Clock Jump I had, because I played that with records. You know, you stand in a room and you pretend like you're a lead trumpet player and you play with the records, like we've all done. You know, and that's that's something that everybody has to do during some period in their life. So, yeah, I definitely had aspirations to do it. And I'd already done it anyway in drill and home in my basement.
Did you step into the lead chair
in the Basie Band?
Yeah.
Right into the lead chair, and I had come right from Woody Herman's band. You know.
And Thad Jones was conducting at that time.
Yeah, actually I got there at a pivotal period. I got there right when Basie had died. And then Eric Dixon was the conductor. I don't know if you know Eric, but he was a great tenor player in the band. He was straw boss during the later years. And it's a great sort of lesson about, I don't know if it's too trivial to tell on your tape, but a lesson about sort of business, you know. Always nice to observe stuff. Basie died, and the guy said, we want to keep the band going, let's try to keep it going. Eric Dixon, the straw boss, said, okay, I'll cut off the tunes and I'll announce them, but we'll sort of not have a leader. I won't be the leader, I'll just cut off tunes and announce, you know. It won't be a big deal. Basie was never really an out front man. He just played and he said a couple things. We'll run it like that. Well, the nostalgia of it kept for about 6 months, and they could keep the gigs, and maybe they'd cut off a little bit of the money from the price that they were getting when, you know, because Basie was booked for probably a year into his death, you know. So they kept the same gigs. But then after 6 months, the prices started going down because the nostalgia, okay, he's passed on. The band's probably not any good. So the prices get lower, and there's no out front person, no person to say, because it's funny, I realized, you know, I don't mean to keep talking about business things. You know, I even realized that, like, I was in the Basie band on and off for almost 4 years. And it's one humbling thing as a musician to go somewhere and, like, I'd been playing with them for 4 years. I went to New York, and I'd visit New York, people would say, what you doing? I said, I'm playing with the Basie band. You don't know that?
Right.
And they're like, no. Are they still going? And you're like, wait a minute, I just got a standing ovation in Iowa last night. You don't know about, so it's that, you know,
right.
You have to have really a lot of strength as an artist to, you know, because nobody, look, I played at Hamilton College last night, and hopefully people enjoyed it, but nobody else knows that about that than these people in Hamilton. You know, so you have to have a lot of strength because, you know, think your name is getting out there, and that people, you know, it's a long process.
Right.
That's what was happening to the Basie band. They needed some national press, and they didn't have one person to center in on, a star or a person.
Right.
So they found out they had to get somebody. So they hired Thad Jones. And Thad came on, and immediately the prices went up, and the band was able to survive, you know. Because, see, they didn't cut anybody's salary. They just kept, so you got to keep a consistent thing coming in. And Thad did very well for the band. And for me, it was like I was in heaven. Thad Jones, I just talked about him quickly. He was like a father to me. I followed him around like a little puppy, because there are certain people I think that are born leaders. It's like they're put here, okay, you're going to be a leader. And he was one of those people, a natural born leader. And I sort of just followed him around, and everything he did, he could inspire people on the bandstand. It's really when I learned that whatever band or organization there is, it takes upon the tone of the person that stands in front of it. In other words, that Thad could be standing in front of the band and sound one way. He could leave, and Woody Herman would walk in front of the band. It would sound different. The band takes upon, or the orchestra, Seiji Ozawa, he stands in front, he's going to sound different than if Eugene Ormandy, or Eugene, just his presence is going to give the people know that they have to play differently for each person. So what Thad does is he was a natural born leader, but he also could push people. And I know with me, and I've spoken to many lead trumpet players about this, he could just look at you and go, ah, like that. And he would pull something out of you. You know, he was a great conductor that way. And he also, you know, he could make you do more than you thought you could do, was what leaders are very good at. I remember he would write out these sets, and I'd say, Thad, you're going to play 3:30, and you're going to play the tune, it's called Basie, it's Ernie Wilkins' chart, and Shiny Stockings. Then you're going to play this new tune you wrote, and then you're going to play Whirly Bird. Those are all chop busters. He goes, that's right up your alley. And he'd smile. And I'm a young guy, very impressionable. I'm going, geez, you know, he believes I can do this. Maybe I can. And when I started to get tired, he'd just look at me and go, ah! And I get this burst of energy. It was like he was throwing, like, you know, electricity at me or something. And I go, yeah, I can do it, you know.
Wow.
So that's the kind of magic that a person like that has, in addition to all the musicianship that he had. And you know, the first night he came on the band, he had no reason to be studying old Sammy Nestico charts, which we were playing a lot of. He conducted all of them. He didn't know those charts. Wow. He could conduct stuff he never even heard before.
in his writing, did he have any conflict with the management as far as trying to put his own
Absolutely, yeah. They didn't want to play his charts. He wasn't happy there. It's the first time on tape, folks, that they weren't, maybe I'll get assassinated for this.
No, I doubt
the guys in the band didn't want him there. Look, you know, we just talked about change a minute ago. Change is a very difficult thing. I'm dealing with it constantly in my life. We're all dealing with it. You know, people don't want to change, and time goes on. They needed Thad Jones, and he provided a boost for the band. They didn't want to play his music. They said that they claimed that Basie never liked his music anyway. That's the reason he left, and he did leave because he wrote Backbone and Big Dipper for them, and it didn't go over well. And he left and started his own band, which is fine. They said, well, Basie didn't like him because his stuff was getting too modern. He shouldn't be here now. The reality was people needed to have a name in front of the band. He made us rehearse. That band didn't like to rehearse.
No.
Look, when you're on the road every day of the year, you just want to play your gig and go, you know. Thad says, no, we got to rehearse. We need some freshness in this band. And we started rehearsing, and the band sounded better. And he made the band sound better, you know. That's my opinion on that. Then we had, he got cancer. Thad did a great tour with Caterina Valente, a singer from Germany. He wrote a whole album for her, which if you ever come to my house, I'll play the album. It's absolutely incredible. He wrote all the music. We recorded it in Miami. Went to Germany after the record came out, did a 3-week tour. It was one of those tours where you get on the bus, the music is so incredible, you can't wait to get to the gig that night. You're fidgeting as you're on the bus. This. Because you can't wait to get off the bus to play. You're playing this incredible music. That was what that tour was for me. Thad had cancer at that time. He didn't tell anybody, but we knew he'd lost a ton of weight. And he could hardly walk on stage, but once he got on stage, he started dancing, conducting the music. He'd written a bunch of new charts. He wrote the best Stevie Wonder medley I'd ever heard in my life. Doing all this stuff, he'd walk off stage, and it was like he'd getting ready to die that minute because he was so tired. But again, it's what music can do to you. It can bring you to your feet and give you that energy. You know?
I like your impressions of him conducting.
Oh.
He had a certain, I mean, nobody conducted like him.
Well, when you talk to some other people about that, ask them how his conducting inspired them, and I think you'll get the same response. Really a way of giving you some energy and that kind of thing. So then he went back to Europe. I remember talking to him a couple times on the phone. And then, never forget, I went to the Village Vanguard one Monday night, and I walked in, and they have a picture of him on the thing conducting. And I paid my admission, and I looked at that picture, and I said, that's my man Thad. And I walked over, and I think I saw somebody from the band. And I said, did you know that Thad passed away today? I said, you're kidding. And I remember for me, that was my first experience with somebody I loved dying. I was like, first time I like cried, you know? I went, because I was very confused. You know, you don't know when you first experience death, and we all experience it more as we get older. But you know, this is the guy that I'd given big hugs to all the time, and sitting by him on the bus and trying to talk to him about music and what I should practice, and he would help me when I was improvising and things like that, and supported me in my life, and I just developed a love for him, and then all of a sudden, somebody said, well, he's dead. So that was my first one with that, and I, you know, I was just trying to deal with, how do you deal when somebody dies?
Yeah.
You know? But then you have to look back and say, God, I'm so thankful that I was like able to sit by this guy who I love and was such a great inspiration to me, and it's a great memory for me.
Really, in the Vanguard Orchestra, I mean, it was an inspiration to so many players coming up and writers.
Sure, absolutely.
That was great stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, then Frank came on after Thad, Frank Flostor, and had a whole different approach to his way of running the band, but it was still a great approach. And, you know, he was one of the first people who I saw who had so much music coming out of him. He and Thad, and, you know, we're always worried as musicians and artists, like, you know, is this just a fluke? Am I going to run out of ideas pretty soon? And if you can be around some people like that, I mean, Frank would sit on the bus with a pen, P-E-N, and write chart after, it was like he wrote too many charts almost. It's like, Frank, we haven't learned this other one yet. It's like he had all this, and he just had to come out, and, you know? And so you learn by watching people like that, you know, each of us has this stuff in us. If we could just find where it is and what it is, it's there, you know, and just like, don't be afraid, like, don't stop it up, and let's get the cholesterol out and let it just come out, you know, because we all become so paralyzed with fear, you know. So it's great to be around people who I call them like free spirits. Just don't give a damn. Just let it come out. Let your creativity come out. Just don't be afraid to be who you are. And it's like, still, I'm trying to learn how to do that. I'm trying to learn how to not be me, you know, or try to learn how to not be afraid to be me.
Oh.
You know, it's like what Tony Bennett once said, if you want to be something really different, just try being yourself, you know. It's that great, just trying to not be afraid of that. And so it's great to be around creative people like that, you know, to check them out.
Do you regret not finishing college at all?
Well, at this point, I don't see what the specific degree I would have gotten, a bachelor's in performance. I mean, I don't know what that would do for me in my life right now. My mother died of cancer about 2.5 years ago, and on her deathbed, she still was ranting and raving about me, wanting me to get a degree. But, you know, I hope that she understands, and I think I know, you know, Mom, I'm not starving, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just don't see what taking the time out to do that. What I've done and what school was such an incredible experience for me, Eastman, an absolutely incredible experience. To play one day in a brass quintet, to play the next day in a symphony, to play the next day a recital with somebody. I was working outside of school in Latin bands, you know, to help me pay for my lunch and my laundry and all that. Club dates, I was playing a lot of club dates. The guy was a gambler, actually, who did the club dates, but he always paid me. I was very happy about that. Maybe it was because I was big, I don't know. And then Jingles I was already starting to do while I was in college. So I was starting to work already in college, constantly practicing. I was the first person in practice in the morning, last one, then leave. The guard was like, okay, there's Byron. I got to kick Byron out the practice room. It's 11 o'clock. He knows it closes at 11. I got to kick him out again. You know, I was the first and last always, you know. So the experience of being in school was an incredible experience, and I thank my parents daily for giving me that and supporting me and helping me financially through that period. I mean, they really sacrificed, and the one great thing I hope that I can do is give that to my own kids, that same kind of educational experience in college. So the time was not wasted, but I just didn't get a degree from college. But from that, when my first gig out of college, well, I left after my sophomore year to go tour with Clark Terry in Europe, and that was like a 6-week tour in Europe and then a 6-week tour in the States. And then they didn't think I was going to go back. My parents, first of all, they told me no when I asked them could I do it. And actually they put it like this. They said, what would we say if we said no, that you can't do this? I'd say I'd go anyway. And they went, that's what we thought. So go ahead and do it. And just promise us that you'll go out and come back to school and take a leave of absence. So I came back.
Well, it's another kind of education for sure, to go on the road with Clark Terry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to hear him play every night, and, you know, great experience. And then after that, I came back to school and had more learning experiences, you know, and getting ready to graduate, calling up Clark and saying, man, you know, it's like my last semester of school, and I have no idea what I'm going to do. And that's then another reason I made this vow to myself, is if I can help some kids not freak out, some young college students not freak out when it becomes their senior year, if I, and what I think all universities should do, can start people when they're freshmen thinking about, you know, you got 4 years, but start thinking about what you might want to do as you leave this place, and what things you need to prepare to make sure you have the skills, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, I had the skill of playing the trumpet, but I didn't know where I was going to go with it. So I called up Clark. What am I going to do? He says, don't worry about a thing. You're going to call in a couple days from somebody. I was like, okay, thanks, Clark. He's always so good about that. And I thank him for always helping me and so many others out. A couple days later, Lionel Hampton called me up and said, hey, Gate, look here. Clark Dad told me you can play higher than Cat Anderson. I said, okay. He said, look, I want you to come up to Albany, New York, and play a gig with my band. I said, okay. He said, my manager will be calling you. I said, well, how much will the gig pay? I don't talk about no money, but he'll tell you about it. So went and did this gig, and I called up Clark. I said, Clark, I just got this call from Lionel Hampton. He's thinking about hiring me for this tour he has in Europe. But he said that you told him I can play higher than Cat Anderson. He said, man, I'll try to get the Cat to hire you. Now, when you go and take a solo, just play some high notes and he'll like it. So I said, okay. So here I am, this Eastman student. First of all, you know, when you're in college, there's a lot of music you play in college that you never play anywhere else because they don't have the time to rehearse it. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if you understand.
Say that again.
There's a lot of music in college that you won't play anywhere else because the music just takes so long to prepare.
Yeah.
In other words, not to give another tangent, it's about time when you go to professional arena. You go to Chicago Symphony. Oh, let me take a better example. When you go play a show somewhere, they're going to try to make the music not so difficult because they might have an hour, 2 hours at the most to rehearse it.
Right.
They can't give you a bunch of incredibly hard stuff. They're going to give you something that is pretty readable. So I had been playing this music that was impossible, all these time changes and really counting and doing all this stuff, and also very jazz but stiff, you know. Mm-hmm. But my reading was, because you know, in the Eastman you read every day and it's tough stuff too. So I go to this thing and I'm reading my ass off because I'm really used to reading this hard stuff. Yeah. And the only thing I'm lacking is a good feel, you know, I'm playing a little stiff. But then the guys are looking at me like, wow, this cat really reads well. Comes time for my first solo, I say, I got to get this gig, and this man wants to hear some high notes. So I'm like, and the cats are looking at me like, what does this cat play on these high notes? That's not too tasty, you know, but I'm trying to get the gig, you know. So he liked it, and so then I left school even before I took my finals. Uh-huh. And I told my parents, I said, oh, I can make them up, and I'll take them later, and, you know, I never did. But I got to go on a 6-week tour of Europe with Lionel Hampton's band. A guy named Frankie Dunlop was the drummer, formerly with Thelonious Monk. Incredible drummers. The first time I realized that a drum could be a melodic instrument. Mm-hmm. He'd play solos every night, and I'd end up singing them when I got off stage. Wow. You know, he'd play like, bam, bam, spop, ba da ba da billy da boom, boom, shagang, shgap, ba da billy da pop, pop, wham, bop, ba da spilly da, ow, bam, bam, scop, ba da billy da, ooh. It's like stuff like that. It's like he was playing bebop on the drums. And I'd never heard, you know, whenever I'd heard drummers solo, other than like when I listened to Max Roach with Clifford, it was like, yeah, I can sing that. But to be on stage with a guy that was like playing bebop on the drums, it was like he would play songs, you know? Wow. You know that song, Red Cross? He'd be playing that, and he'd play bebop on the drums. And I was like, wow, because before when I hear kids play drum solos or in school and stuff, it was like somebody was throwing some pots and pans down the stairs, you know? And here was like, this guy was playing music on the drums. So that was between him and hearing Lionel Hampton play every night, which was incredible, and watching how he integrated entertainment into, you know, the whole thing was interesting. And then Lionel was the first guy, I know we're running, you know, short here, but Lionel was the first guy that he heard me playing. He said, yeah, sometimes you sound like Louis Armstrong, you know? And I had a little, I always loved Louis, but, you know, he wasn't like my main thing. My man was Kenny Dorham and Lee Morgan. But I always loved Louis Armstrong. He said, you know, I recorded with Louis Armstrong. I said, of course, I know, you know. He said, let's play You and Me When You're Smiling. Because when Louis would play that, it would seem like when he got to that last note, it was the highest note in the world. He said, so when you play it, I want you to do that. Wow. So I started playing When You're Smiling with Lionel. We would just do it once a night, you know. And his whole thing is like, I'm going to make you a star. He used to tell everybody that, you know, make you a star. Or he would say, stick with me, Gates. I'm going to make some money. You dig. So, he would really say that. That's right. So we started playing When You're Smiling, and it started me listening to Louis. Again, you know, I always had heard stuff and really going back and focusing in on him. Plus, that feeling of Louis was in Lionel's playing, that happiness, you know, that was in Lionel's playing too. So that's why I started getting a little bit into enjoying the music of Louis a little bit more.
Yeah, I've heard it. I heard it in your playing last night every once in a while. I heard something, you know. But can I ask you what the gig ended up paying with Hampton at that point? Because he didn't have a reputation for being...
Well, see, you know, time has gone by, so I'll publicly tell the whole thing to you. But I'll try to leave as many names out as possible. I was told by someone that Europe was another story. The payment in Europe was good, so I'll leave that alone. Very fair, very good. So by somebody, when we get back to the States, you will make $75 a night when we work. I said, yeah, that sounds great. Well, look, when you're in college, somebody said, you're going to make $50. You scream and holler.
Yeah.
I said, great. That's beautiful. So we got to the States, and I wanted a single room because, you know, I want to practice and do my stuff. Most of the guys were double. I was like, get a single room. Well, my room was $60 for the night. Okay. I got my first paycheck. It was based upon $60 a night. So I told this person, I said, excuse me, when we discussed this, it was 75. What are you trying to rip me off? I said 60. So I learned the flip-flop that people do. This is my first business lesson right out of college. How people maybe try to get things in writing. And you know, it's interesting. My father always said, you know, always read what you sign and always try to get what, you know. And I, to this day, and you know one thing I noticed these days, this has nothing to do with music. I went to rent a car the other day and they wanted to have me sign something. People get nervous if you read what they want you to sign.
Yeah.
They'll look, what are you reading? I'm reading what you told me to sign. Well, it just says that you're going to rent a car and that if you do any damage, well, let me read that then. And then I said, well, this here says that you're going to charge my card, that this document charges my card if it gets damaged. But there's no damages yet. I should sign this after. They said, no, we just do that. I said, no, that's not what this says. It says, I agreed to pay for the damages on the car. There's no damages on the card, so you can't charge my credit. I said, you could just mark this sheet and say that there are damages if I sign it at the bottom. Well, so then I don't sign it, see? So people, they even get, so that was my first business lesson. With Lionel Hampton, to try to, you know, see if you can get things in writing. Some people are reluctant to, and sometimes you have to, you know, certain people you do have to trust, you know. There's a lot of guys to this day, a lot of the older jazz musicians, they don't do contracts, they don't, you know, but they're people of their word. I know guys say they know promoters in Europe, you know. I just don't want to name any names, but because but they have great relationships with them, word of mouth, and that's very important too. Your bond and your word. Look, they have a friend in Europe says, look, I'll book a tour for you. It'll be 3 weeks. Pay you this much. I'll send you a ticket in a couple weeks. They both agree to it, and that's it. And everything's straight. And I have those agreements myself with people in Europe, and I know nothing written down. And then I have people that I'm especially have to have things written down. So.
Right.
My first good business lesson was with Lionel. You know.
Well, you've done an awful lot in your career so far. Has there been a time with, sometimes these are hard questions, has there been a ridiculous moment with Jingles or something along the way that you can recall, stepping into a studio to have to do a really outlandish session?
Well, the most outlandish thing, especially in playing for commercial music, is to be asked to improvise. And you're going, why? Improvising is fun to do on it, because the people don't know what they want. So if you're just creative, you know, they don't want that. They want a specific thing. Better to take the heat off yourself, have the writer write it, then you're in the clear. You just play what's on. I hate improvising on Jingles. When people start suggesting that, I don't say anything. Because you get things like this. Hey, you get on the talkback mic. Because you know, it's so funny to be in a studio by yourself. It's going to happen to me Monday. It always happens. You're there by yourself. They've got the tape. They're in a booth.
Yeah.
You're isolated from them. You can't hear what they're saying. They hear everything you do, say, or breathe, or play. And so you play, and then you get this silence. And you're looking and trying to guess what they're saying. He sucks. He's terrible. He's out of tune. You know, you're guessing. And then they come on, whether it's good or bad, they go, sounds good, Byron. Marjorie, do you want to tell them what you want? So then they get the client on, the lady from McDonald's or whatever. Yeah, could you play with more colors? Like, think of spring. You know, that's what we're looking for. This is what you get. That's when you start to go, look. You almost want to go. And that's why it's better to, look, if the writer writes something, then the pressure's on him. Because I don't care about colors, I don't care about spring, I don't care about fall. I want to just play and get out of here. But those moments are only like 15-minute periods, or when maybe you're playing a club date. You know, I work with, see, this is all going to be a tape now. I work with Lester Lannon sometimes. It's a club date, big club date office. And it seems like you get on stage and your watch stops. You know, it's like, it seems, 4 hours seems so long. What's that great thing that Einstein said? It's like, time is so relative. It's like you can be with a beautiful girl and the time, 1 hour seems like a minute. Where if you sit on a hot stove for a minute,
yeah.
You know? So it's really a relative thing there.
Just to wrap up here, what's your impression of the work that goes on at Lincoln Center Jazz and well, not Smithsonian, the Carnegie Hall?
Well, I think that my one concern for young musicians is that they have a place to play. And I'll hopefully put myself in there. I'm a young musician. And I'm glad that it gives, those organizations give young musicians an opportunity to play. And I hope that jazz will go forward. We have to really be careful that, and I'll be honest with you, if I want to hear Count Basie's version of 1 O'Clock Jump from 1930-something, I'd rather hear the record.
Than a group of people playing the same arrangement
Than a group of people
today.
putting together, I mean, I think you can play the song, but I don't want to hear what Lester played on the solo. I don't want to hear his solo recreated, but that's my personal opinion. I think it's good for people to practice that stuff.
Yeah.
And I practice Louis Armstrong solos, practice Roy Eldridge solos, Kenny Dorham solos. I got 25 I've transcribed, and I try to play through almost like etudes, you know. Work on all that stuff, but I don't really want to record it because that's what they did. And the most, you know, the difficult thing is to try to find your own identity as a jazz musician.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to work on now. It's the most humbling thing that can happen for you, is to try to find your own voice in this music. And I just don't want, and I really enjoy the way I play in the Carnegie Hall Jazz Band. I like the way that we do it. We'll play like standards and stuff, but do new arrangements of them. And that's really nice. And then you don't have to recreate anybody's solo or anything like that. But you know, it's funny. You got to realize when the bands came up, when Thad started his band, it was like, not let's recreate something. It was just like, okay, let's get some guys together and let's make some great music. It's hard when things, because then we are going the way of like the orchestras and that kind of stuff. When you get groups like Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, they're very valuable. But I hope that some other bands come along. You know, Maria Schneider has a great band, and that's the kind of, you know, that's a great example. And Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center do too. There's something to be said for that struggle you have to go through as an artist. You know, I've been with guys in Europe, and the terrible players sometimes, and they'll go, well, you know, the government pays me. I got a grant to do a tour with my jazz band and this and that, and they gave me $100,000 for the year, And I'm like, man, but you suck. No. I think there might be something to, you know, when a guy goes to New York and, you know, there's not much stuff in the what do you call it? There's no gigs for him, and he's just sitting in that greasy apartment. He said, man, I gotta be the best, because there ain't no work out here. I gotta get my stuff together. And that's what New York and places like that do for you. You've got to learn how to play then.
Enforced inspiration,
And
I guess.
that's right. It forces you to just be.
Yeah.
There's something to that. So, you know, we have a lot of media creations these days. And it's fun to see those groups and bands that really have just come out of nothing. It's fun.
Well, I have a feeling we're going to have to do part 2 down the road.
Yeah.
Because we didn't get to a lot of stuff I wanted to talk to you about. But I know you're on your way. It's been a pleasure to have you here at the college, and I hope we can do it again.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks for your time.
Thanks.